Yo, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy Bill Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBZ and the entire basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune into Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. So, with that being said, there, guys, this is just more of my reply video to what Too Raw for DB did when it came to Shaquille O'Neal. Always arguing with Charles Barkley when it comes down to the four rings, comparison here, guys. And it's always fun and entertaining when Shaq, tries to argue with Barkley a lot, but it comes across very childish and very petty to me because listen, I get that Shaq won them championships, but let's be real about something here. Shaq underachieved as a basketball player in this sense, okay? Now listen, he is in the Hall of Fame. Yes, he's a four-time NBA champion, okay? I'm not taking away his accomplishments at all, okay? He is one of the greatest centers to ever play the game. But let's be real about something here, okay? Shaquille O'Neal could have been way more. He could have been probably the greatest player of all time if he would have done one thing that really was the big thing that Kobe and Phil Jackson had a huge problem with was that his commitment to staying in shape and basically putting the work in the off season to pretty much getting ready for the regular season. Okay, now listen, when you look back at both Barkley and Shaq's careers, okay, with Barkley, he was pretty much a guy that he was a kind of guy based on his frame and his size. Many people didn't think that he was going to be the dominant player that he was going to be. They saw how good he was when he was in Auburn, but they saw his weight issues and they felt that those weight problems were going to really, hurt him in the long term in the NBA, not knowing that people didn't recognize how talented the guy was. When you look back at Barkley's career, through the early days with the Philadelphia 76ers, as I pull up the stats of Barkley's career, Barkley was a kind of guy that he was 6'4", he was what 6'4", 6'6", you know what I mean? He was husky, but he had a certain speed and element to his game that just made him so unique, okay? Now, when you look at the 8 seasons when he played with the Philadelphia 76ers, okay? He averaged 23 and a half points per game. In terms of his rebounding, okay, he averaged 11.6 rebounds per game in those 8 seasons with the Philadelphia 76ers, okay? And there was one period in 88 when he averaged 28.3 points per game, okay? And 19 and basically in 1991, which basically Michael Jordan won MVP that year, he averaged 27.6 points per game. All right. And in 1990, the year when many people felt that he should have won MVP over Magic Johnson, Barkley averaged 25.2 points per game and also grabbed 11 and a half rebounds per game. Like, come on, man. Like, listen, Barkley succeeded beyond his expectations, okay? Many people didn't think that he was going to have the career that he had, but he committed himself to being in shape. You know what I mean? He improved his shooting. He basically dominated his rebounding prowess. Okay, and he was the kind of player that basically can run to grab the rebound, lead the fast break, and power dunk it in your face. Why do you think a lot of players didn't want to take charges against him back in the day? Okay, now listen, Barkley succeeded beyond his expectations. All right. When Shaq came into the NBA, he did succeed in the early parts of his expectations. But here's the thing: Shaq had to go through a lot of growing pains before he started winning championships. Okay. Now let's reflect back to his early playoff years. I'm talking about Shaquille O'Neal. Okay. 1993, his rookie year. Okay. The Magic, improved, with Shaq when they won 41 regular season games. They went 41 and 41. Okay. Now they barely missed the playoffs by a tiebreaker with the Indiana Pacers. Okay. Now the next year, 94 and 90, and basically in 94, they finally made the playoffs as a fourth seed, and they were favored to beat the Indiana Pacers, who were a fifth seed, not knowing that the Pacers in the second half of the season had the best record in the league that year. Okay, they went, I think, 29-5 in the second half of the season. Just phenomenal basketball, and the Pacers went into Orlando, won game one by a buzzer beater by Byron Scott, which basically led them to a 3-game sweep against the Magic. Okay? All right? Remember, that was Penny's rookie year too as well. Let's not forget that. 94, 95. All right? After winning, 47 games in 94, they acquired Horace Grant as a free agent and won 57 regular season games. Okay? And they beat Michael Jordan and the Bulls in the second round. When Jordan basically came back, late into the 94-95 season. Okay, they avenged the loss against Indiana, beating them in 7 games. But let's keep in mind they got swept by the Houston Rockets, who were a 6th seed that year. Yes, they were defending champions, but they were not favored. The consensus was that the Magic was a blast through the Rockets because of their explosive athletic ability. All right, and remember, the Magic at one point held a 20-point lead in Game One before they allowed the Rockets to get back into the ball game. Okay, and if it wasn't for the missed free throws by Nick Anderson in the final seconds, all right, that gave the Rockets a chance to tie the game, which they eventually did. The Magic would have won Game One and maybe would have won the championship. But you know, is the rest was history. Okay, they got swept in 4 straight games. The next year, they won 60 regular season games, but it was pretty much a quiet 60 victories because it was overlapped by the Bulls year when they won 72 games, made it to the conference final, and what happened? They got swept again in 4 straight in the conference finals at the hands of the Bulls. All right. Now the next year, Shaq becomes a free agent, goes to the Lakers for about 120. Okay, remember this was Kobe Bryant's rookie year. Now Kobe didn't get much playing time until late into the season, but last time I checked, they lost in 5 games at the hands of the Utah Jazz. Okay, 98. All right. They won 61 regular season games with that loaded roster of Eddie Jones, Nick Van Exel, and Kobe Bryant, and Elton Campbell, Robert Horry, and the rest of the crew. Okay, but in the conference finals, they got swept again by the Utah Jazz in 4 straight games. Then there was the lockout shortened season where everything was just went haywire. Del Harris, got fired, after the first 8 games. Okay, and they traded Eddie Jones and Elton Campbell to the Hornets for Glenn Rice and also J.R. Reed. And they came into the playoffs as a 4 seed, but then they made it to the second round, and then they got swept again by the San Antonio Spurs. So you think about this for a moment, you guys. Through Shaq's careers, in basically when they got eliminated, they either lost in 5 or got swept. He was basically 1 for 23 during his playoff, during basically the losses when they got swept or when they lost in 5 games. So it's not like Shaq's teams were competitive to the bitter end. When they lose a first game, they end up losing the series in a whimper. Like, come on, man. Unlike Barkley's teams, where pretty much they pretty much were nail biters, okay? And during his time in Phoenix, you know, he basically won the MVP that year and ran into Michael Jordan and the Bulls. Listen, all those great players of the '90s, okay? The Stockton, Malone, you know what I mean? Chris Mullen, okay? Let's think. Barkley himself, okay? And Lonzo Mourning to a certain extent before 2006. All those great players in the 90s. They were great players, but they all fell short because Michael Jordan and Akeem Olajuwon basically monopolized the league. All right? That's just the facts. All right? And if Shaq came into the NBA earlier in the decade, let's be real about something here, okay? Shaq would have not won a championship. He would have been in the same conversation with Charles Barkley and the rest of those guys that I mentioned. Okay, all those guys fell short of a championship because of the dominance of Michael Jordan. And don't forget, oh yeah, and also Reggie Miller, Patrick Ewing. You know what I mean? Those were great players that fell short of a championship because they always ran into Michael Jordan or Hakeem Olajuwon. You know what I'm saying? So the other thing too that just befuddles me with Shaq was that despite making defensive team 3 times in his career. Okay, listen, there was only There was only one time in his career where he basically led the league. Actually, never mind. He never led the NBA in rebounding. You know what I mean? And there was always certain questions about Shaq later on in the decade in LA about his commitment to staying in shape. That's why I always felt that when Shaq won his first championship, he pretty much relaxed way too much. He came in fat, out of shape, and it irritated the hell out of Kobe Bryant. Because like, listen, Kobe after the first week when they won their first championship, after the celebration was over with, he immediately went back into the gym, worked on his game to get ready for the new campaign to defend their championship. And when Shaq came into training camp, he was fat, eating Big Macs, and it drove Kobe absolutely insane. That's where a lot of the tension came from. Like, listen, if Kobe's perspective was that, listen, I'm putting in all this work in to try to defend our championship, and you're coming in here fat, out of shape, thinking it's no big deal. We can just work it out through the season. And then during that 2002 campaign, let's don't forget about this. Shaq was playing with an arthroscopic toe injury, okay? And he had two sprained ankles, and he had his ring, he had his pointer finger, cut that basically needed 3 stitches during the 2002 playoffs. So Shaq was pretty much injured riddled throughout the entire postseason, and there were times where Kobe Bryant had to assert a little bit more of the offensive responsibility because Shaq was pretty much getting beat up because of the fact that he didn't commit himself and staying in shape, man. You know, let me drink my Powerade for a second. My point is this, man. Listen, we respect Shaq for what he did as a player. All right, but let's keep in mind you had to have a second sidekick to you to win those championships. Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade. Okay, you weren't just the guy that would really was led the team. That basically was the guy that you were the centerpiece. But let's keep in mind you had to have another co-star with you to help lead the way to your championships. That's why I get so irritated when Shaq tries to come across as saying like, "Man, I won 4 rings. I did that all by myself." Like, no, bro, no. Listen, let's be real about something here. You take away Robert Ory's game-winning shot against the Sacramento Kings, they would lose that series in 5 games. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Okay, let's put this in proper perspective. If they would have lost against the Portland Trailblazers in the Game 7 of the 2000 Western Conference Finals when they were up by 15, that would have been another year of disappointment for Shaquille O'Neal. You win. You were one vote away from being the unanimous MVP, and you somehow, some way, you don't lead your team to the championship that year, bro. There would have been major criticism against Shaquille O'Neal if they didn't came back and win that game against the Portland Trailblazers. Okay, let's be real about something here. Okay, Shaq was vastly dominant to what he was and had perhaps the best, player efficiency rating in the league in 2000. But like I said before, he didn't commit himself long term to keep himself in shape and keeping his skills fine tuned. That's why his body broke down a lot. We saw that a lot of it when he went to Miami, and then when he was with Phoenix, when he was in Cleveland, and onwards to his various stops until eventually retired because his Achilles blew out on him. You know what I'm saying? That's why I always respect Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and his longevity in the NBA. Kareem, say what you want to say, but he took such great care of his body. Through yoga training, through endurance training, he took such great care of his body. That's why he was able to play all 22 to 21 seasons in the NBA that long and became the all-time leading scorer in NBA history, for crying out loud. Like, what really bobbles my mind about Shaq is that if he didn't have the kind of star power that Barkley had later on in his career, he would have not won any of them championships. Let's be clear about that, okay? I'm sure Barkley would have loved to have a kind of a Penny Hardaway player on his team or a Kobe Bryant on his team. You know what I'm saying? See, that's why I get the sense that Barkley has resentment against Shaq about this. You had great players around you, okay? Now, sure, I had good players around me, but we didn't get the lucky breaks that we needed to win those championships, to win any championships, okay? Mike Barkley always ran into Michael Jordan, even when he was in Philadelphia. He ran into Jordan in the '93 finals. He ran into Olajuwon in 94, 95. I mean, that's just how it is. He ran into great players when they were at their absolute best. Okay. And when Shaq tries to, play this role of, oh, I want all four of those rings, you got four rings, you ain't got none, bro, that just comes across as petty to me. And anytime anytime if somebody was smart enough to pretty much tell Shaq, listen, you would have not won those rings without Kobe. And let's be real, if you would have played in the NBA earlier on in the decade, you would have not had any rings yourself because you would have easily lost to Olajuwon over and over again. You would have lost to Jordan over and over again. Okay, you would have been in the same conversation as a lot of those players that I named in the '90s that failed to win a championship. But Shaq benefited because Michael retired. Akeem Olajuwon eventually got old and eventually retired in 2002. He eventually won his titles at that right time. But let's be real. If the Spurs were always a pest to Shaq's teams, okay? They took two championships from him. All right. He would have won at least maybe what, 5 to 6 rings, barring injury and barring the issues he would have with Kobe. Nobody could have touched him at that particular point in time. All right. But let's be real about this. You had the Mavericks who were up and coming. You had the Blazers. You had the Spurs. You had the Kings. I mean, it was a loaded Western Conference back then, and you needed every bit of energy within yourself and Kobe to win all three of those rings. So cut the act, Shaq. All right. You're a great player, but let's be real. You could have been far more greater than what your skill set was and what your health stood for. Okay. That's where I tend to agree with Two Raw on that particular aspect. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section.